"You don't belong here, Evelyn. This isn't your house anymore." That was the first thing she said to me, my daughter-in-law. Her voice was sharp, cold, and full of disgust. I froze. I was standing right in front of my own door, holding my own keys, and that girl had just told me I didn't belong. I remember staring at her, trying to understand if she was joking, but she wasn't. Her hand was on the doorknob, blocking me from walking in. Her eyes were full of hate. I said, "Melissa, what did you just say?" And she looked me straight in the eye and said it again. "You don't belong here." Then she slammed the door right in my face. For a second, I didn't even breathe. The wind hit my back and I felt like someone had pulled the ground from under me. I just stood there, holding my keys, not knowing what to do. That cabin was mine. Every nail, every board, every bill was paid by me. I had worked 35 years for it. Every night shift, every weekend, every time I skipped buying something for myself so I could save more. And now, I was standing outside of it, being treated like a stranger. I knocked again, harder. "Melissa, open the door. Where's Ethan?" No answer. When the door finally opened, it wasn't her. It was my son, my only son. The boy I had raised on my own after his father died. The boy I had fed, dressed, taught, protected. The boy I loved more than my own life. And he said, "Mom, you shouldn't have come here." I thought I misheard him. "What?" He didn't look me in the eyes. "This isn't a good time." "Ethan, this is my house. What do you mean it's not a good time?" He sighed like he was tired of me, like I was the one making things difficult. "We just need a few more weeks, okay? Melissa's parents are here and it's been stressful." I said, "You told me you'd stay here for 2 nights. 2, that was 2 months ago." He rubbed his face. "Mom, please. It's just until we figure things out." And then from inside the house, I heard Melissa's voice again. "Ethan, tell her to leave before I call the police." I swear, I felt my heart stop for a moment. I stared at my son, waiting for him to say something, anything, to defend me. But he didn't. He just stood there, his eyes on the ground. That was the moment something inside me broke. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just turned around and walked back to my car. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, but I started the engine anyway. I didn't know where I was driving. I just knew I had to get away before I said something I couldn't take back. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in a cheap motel bed staring at the ceiling, replaying her words over and over in my head. "You don't belong here." When did I stop belonging? When did my own son stop seeing me as his home? I remembered every time I helped him, every bill I paid when he was broke, every time I said yes when I wanted to say no. I even let them move into that cabin, my cabin, because Ethan said he needed a break. "Just a few days, Mom," he said. "You can trust me." I trusted him. I always did. But trust without boundaries turns into blindness, and I had been blind for years. The next morning, I drove to the county office. I told the clerk my situation, and she pulled up the records. "Yes, ma'am," she said. "The property's under your name." I thanked her, printed the proof, and drove straight back. When I parked in front of the cabin, my legs were shaking. I could see them through the window, eating, laughing, like nothing was wrong. I walked up to the door, opened it, and stepped inside. The room went silent. Melissa was the first to speak. "What the hell are you doing here?" I held up the paper in my hand. "Coming home." Ethan stood up. "Mom, we talked about this." "No," I said. "You talked. I listened, and I'm done listening." Melissa crossed her arms. "You left, remember? You said you needed space." "I left because you made it impossible to breathe in my own house." Her parents were sitting at the table, pretending not to watch, but I could see the smirks. They'd been living there too, eating my food, sleeping in my rooms, using my things. I turned to Ethan. "Did you tell them they could stay here?" He didn't answer. "Ethan, look at me." He finally did, and I saw fear in his eyes, but not fear of me, fear of losing her. "Mom, please," he said softly. "We'll leave soon. Just don't make this harder." "Harder?" I laughed, but there was no humor left in me. "You've already made it as hard as it can be." Melissa rolled her eyes. "Here we go again. The guilt trip. The poor mother act." I snapped. "The poor mother act? You've lived off me for years. Every dime I gave you, every favor, every time I picked up the pieces after you two messed up your lives, that was love, not weakness." She scoffed. "Love? You control everything. You buy things just so you can remind us you paid for them." I stepped closer. "I bought this house because your husband couldn't, because I wanted him to have a future. But I see now. I didn't give him a future. I gave him an excuse." Ethan whispered, "Mom, stop." "No, not this time. You let her talk to me like that in my house, and you think I'm the one who should stop?" Melissa's father stood up. "Maybe we should all calm down." I turned to him. "You've been living here too, haven't you? Using my electricity, my water, my food. How convenient for everyone except the woman who actually owns this place." He tried to smile awkwardly. "It's temporary." "Temporary ends tonight." I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone, and called the sheriff's office. "Hello? Yes, I need to report a trespassing. They're refusing to leave my property." Melissa gasped. "You're calling the police on your own son?" "I'm calling them on people who forgot how to respect me." She shouted, "You're insane." I said quietly, "No, I'm awake." When the officers arrived, everything happened fast. They asked for the deed. I showed them the papers. One of them, a woman named Claire, nodded and said, "Ma'am, you have every right to be here. They'll need to leave tonight." Ethan's face went pale. He looked at me as if he didn't recognize me anymore, but I didn't recognize him either. While they packed, Melissa kept talking, yelling about betrayal, about how I'd ruined their lives. I didn't answer. I just stood by the door, holding the deed, waiting for the noise to stop. When Ethan walked past me carrying a suitcase, I said, "You can always come back, but only as my son, not as a thief." He stopped, eyes watering, but didn't say anything. He just nodded once and walked away. After they left, I closed the door. The silence hit me like a wave. It wasn't peaceful, not yet. It was heavy, the kind of silence that holds everything you've lost and everything you've finally taken back. I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the paper still in my hand. My name, my house, my mistake. People think love means sacrifice, but love without limits becomes surrender. I had surrendered for too long. That night, I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. But that emptiness was honest. It was mine. For the first time in years, I didn't owe anyone an explanation. I made myself a cup of coffee, sat in the dark, and whispered, "This is the cost of taking your life back." And I knew this wasn't the end. It was the start of learning how to be alone without feeling abandoned. Because sometimes the only way to save yourself is to let the people you love fall. And that was the night my story really began. After that night, I thought things would get quiet. I was wrong. 2 days later, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Messages, calls, emails. From Ethan, from Melissa, from her parents. They all said the same thing in different words. "How could you? How could I?" I whispered to myself. "How could you?" I didn't answer them. I didn't block them either. I just let the phone buzz until the battery died. For years, I had been the one fixing everything. Every crisis, every argument, every unpaid bill, I stepped in. Because that's what I thought mothers did. But that night, when I called the police, something inside me shifted. I realized that love isn't about fixing. It's about letting people face the mess they've made. Still, the guilt came like a storm. The second morning, Ethan showed up. I heard his car before I saw him. No knocking, no warning, just the door swinging open. "Mom!" he shouted. I was in the kitchen, making tea. I didn't even look up. "You should have called first." "I've been trying to call." He was angry, desperate. "You called the cops on me, on your own son." I said quietly, "I called the cops on people who were living in my house without my permission." He slammed his hand on the table. "You humiliated me, Mom. Do you even understand what you did?" "I do," I said. I finally stopped pretending. He laughed. That short, bitter laugh people use when they're losing control. "Pretending? You think you're the victim? You abandoned me when I needed you most." "I didn't abandon you. I just stopped rescuing you." He stared at me, jaw tight. "You've changed." "No," I said. "I just woke up." For a second, he didn't say anything. Then he said, "You're going to regret this." I looked him straight in the eye. "Maybe, but at least it'll be my regret, not yours." He stood there for a while, breathing hard. Then he left. I sat down at the table and finally cried. Not the loud kind, just quiet tears that burn on their way down. I cried for the boy he used to be, for the woman I used to be, for all the times I thought love meant saying yes. That afternoon, a letter came. From Melissa's lawyer, it said they intended to pursue restitution for emotional damages and demanded compensation for wrongful eviction. I almost laughed. The woman who told me I didn't belong in my own house now wanted me to pay her for leaving it. I took the letter to my friend Janet, who used to work in legal aid. She read it, rolled her eyes, and said, "They're bluffing, but document everything." So I did. Every message, every voicemail, every memory that proved how deep I'd let them dig into my life. By the end of the week, I had a folder full of proof, not for the court, but for myself. Proof that I wasn't crazy, proof that I had spent years being used under the name of love. The next Sunday, I went to church for the first time in months, not to pray for forgiveness, but for strength. I sat in the back row, alone, and when the choir started singing, I closed my eyes. The words were simple. Let go and let it be. I didn't know if they meant God or pain or family, but they felt right. When I got home, Ethan's car was in the driveway again. I took a deep breath before walking in. He was sitting on the couch, holding an envelope. "I came to return this," he said. It was a check, one I had written him 6 months ago to help with a business idea. It had bounced between his failures and my guilt for half a year. I said, "You don't have to." He interrupted. "I don't want your money anymore." Something in his voice was different, not angry, just empty. "Okay," I said softly. "Then let's talk." He looked up at me, eyes red. "She left," he said. "I didn't ask who. I knew." "Melissa took the car," he continued. "Said she was done with me. Said I was a mama's boy who couldn't grow up." I sat down across from him. "And what do you think?" He hesitated. "I think she's right." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us wasn't angry this time. It was tired. He said, "I don't know how to fix this." I said, "Maybe don't fix it. Just feel it." He looked confused. "What do you mean?" "You've spent your whole life trying to patch things up before they even break. Sometimes you need to let them fall apart first." He nodded slowly, like he wanted to understand but didn't know how. "Mom," he said, voice shaking, "I don't know who I am without you." I reached across the table and took his hand. "Then it's time you find out." He started crying then. Real crying, the kind I hadn't seen since he was a boy. He said, "I messed everything up." I squeezed his hand. "Yes, you did. But now you have a chance to do better, without me cleaning it up for you." He whispered, "I don't deserve your forgiveness." I said, "Maybe not. But I'll give it anyway. For me, not for you." He sat there, shaking his head. I don't know if I can ever forgive myself. I said, "That's your work to do." He left a few hours later. When the door closed, the silence felt different this time. Lighter. Like the air had finally shifted. For the first time, I didn't feel angry at him. I just felt human again. That night, I cooked dinner for one. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat at the same kitchen table where everything had exploded days ago, and whispered to the empty room, "I did it." I had faced my son, not as a victim, not as a savior, just as a woman who finally drew her line. The next morning, I found a note under the door, Ethan's handwriting. It said, "Mom, I'm leaving for a while. I need to figure things out. I'm sorry for everything. Please don't worry. I love you." There was no signature, no number, just that. I folded the note and put it inside the drawer next to the deed. 2 papers that defined my life. One that proved what I owned, and one that reminded me what I had lost. Over the next few weeks, the calls stopped. The house grew quiet again. I started fixing things. A leaky pipe, a broken chair, small things I used to wait for Ethan to help with. And every time I did, I felt stronger. One evening, Janet came over for tea. She looked around and said, "It feels lighter in here." I smiled. "It is." She said, "You know, it's funny. You always wanted peace, and it came the moment you stopped trying to please everyone." I laughed softly. "Guess I was the problem all along." She shook her head. "No, you were just too kind for too long." After she left, I sat by the window and thought about what kindness had cost me. Not money, not property, but identity. I had given so much that I had forgotten where I ended and where others began. That's the thing about being a mother. You spend your life teaching your child how to walk, how to talk, how to live, but you never learn how to let them go. Ethan needed to lose me to find himself, and I needed to lose him to find peace. The next day, I went down to the lake. I hadn't been there since the night everything fell apart. The water was calm. I sat on a rock and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel guilt. I felt still. I whispered to the wind, "If he ever comes back, I'll be here, but not to save him, just to see him." Then I laughed to myself because I realized something. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was living. That's when I knew the fight was over. Not because I'd won, but because I no longer needed to. And for the first time since my husband died, I felt something I thought I'd lost forever. Freedom. It's been 6 months since Ethan left. I still keep his note in the drawer. I read it sometimes, not because I miss him, though I do, but because it reminds me that distance isn't always a punishment. Sometimes, it's the only way to heal. The first few weeks after he left, I didn't know what to do with myself. I'd wake up at 6 every morning like I always had and wait for someone to need me, but no one did. The phone was quiet. The house was quiet. My life was quiet. At first, the silence felt like a wound. Then it started to feel like medicine. I began to notice small things again, the way the light changed through the day. The smell of coffee in the morning, the sound of the lake when the wind picked up. It was as if the world had been waiting for me to shut up long enough to hear it. One day, I found a box in the attic. It was full of old things. Ethan's drawings, my husband's letters, photos from before everything got so heavy. I sat there for hours going through them, laughing and crying at the same time. In one picture, Ethan was maybe 5. He was holding a toy truck, covered in mud, smiling with his whole face. I remember that day. He'd fallen and scraped his knee, and I ran to him with a bandage. He stopped crying the second I hugged him. That's the thing about children. When they're small, love fixes everything. When they're grown, love just reminds them what's broken. That night, I took that photo and pinned it to the fridge. Not as a reminder of what I lost, but of what I built. Weeks turned into months. I learned to live alone, really live. I fixed what was broken, cooked what I wanted, slept when I felt tired, not when someone else needed something. And slowly I started to recognize myself again, not as Ethan's mother or Richard's wife, but as Evelyn. Evelyn Carter, a woman who survived. One morning, I got a letter. No return address, just my name written in handwriting I knew too well. Ethan's. It said, "Mom, I've been in Portland for a while. I got a job at a small marketing firm. It's not much, but it's mine. I'm renting a room with 2 other guys. I'm learning how to live without help. I wanted to call you 100 times, but I thought maybe it's better to write first. I'm sorry for what I said. I didn't mean it. I was angry at myself. But I took it out on you. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you're okay." I read that letter at least 10 times. Each word felt like a slow exhale I didn't know I'd been holding. That night, I sat by the table with the letter in front of me. I didn't cry. I didn't rush to respond. I just let it sit there, like a fragile thing that needed space to breathe. The next morning, I wrote back, "Dear Ethan, I'm okay. The cabin's still standing. So am I. I'm glad you're finding your way. That's all I ever wanted for you. You don't need to earn my forgiveness. It's already yours. But you do need to earn your peace. Keep going. Don't come back until you've found it. I love you, always. Mom." I mailed it the same day. After that, I didn't hear from him for another month. Then one afternoon, I was watering the plants on the porch when I saw a car stop at the end of the driveway. A man stepped out, taller, leaner, older somehow. It took me a moment to realize it was Ethan. He waved. "Hey, Mom." I just stood there, frozen, until I felt my lips curve into a smile. "You came back." He nodded. "Just for a visit." We sat on the porch for hours, talking like strangers who used to know each other deeply. He told me about the job, the city, the roommates, the nights he almost gave up. I told him about the garden, the lake, the quiet. There were pauses, heavy, awkward ones, but also laughter, real laughter. At one point, he said, "You were right, you know. I needed to fall." I said, "We both did." He looked at me for a long moment and said, "I never realized how much I took from you." I shook my head. "You took what I gave. That's not the same thing." He smiled sadly. "I'm trying to be better." I said, "Then be better. Don't just try." He laughed softly. "You sound like Dad." That hit me. Richard used to say that all the time. Don't try. Do. For a second, it felt like he was there with us. When Ethan left later that evening, he hugged me. Really hugged me. The kind where you feel someone's heartbeat against yours. He said, "I'll call you next week." I said, "I'll be here." And this time, I didn't mean it like a promise chained to waiting. I meant it like a truth. I would be here, living, not just existing for someone else. After he drove off, I sat on the porch until the sky turned dark. The crickets started singing, and for the first time I realized how peaceful the sound was. I thought about everything that had happened. The fights, the silence, the police, the tears. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd survive all of that, I would have laughed. But here I was. I learned that losing control isn't the worst thing that can happen to you. Sometimes it's the only way to find out who you really are. I used to think motherhood meant never letting go. Now I know it means holding on just long enough for them to catch themselves when they fall. Ethan still calls me every Sunday. Sometimes we talk for an hour, sometimes just 5 minutes. He tells me about his job, the people he meets, the mistakes he makes, and every time I listen. Not to fix, not to advise, just to listen. A few weeks ago, he said, "Mom, I'm saving up to buy my own place someday." I smiled and said, "Good, just don't ask me to pay for it." He laughed, and for a moment, it felt like everything had come full circle. But this time, the circle didn't close. It expanded, because that's what healing does. It doesn't erase what happened. It makes space for what's next. Sometimes I still catch myself setting 2 plates for dinner, then putting one back. I still think about the years I lost trying to be everything for everyone, but I also think about the woman I became when I finally stopped. Evelyn Carter. A woman who learned that love without boundaries isn't love, it's fear. I still walk to the lake every morning. The water doesn't change much, but I do. I breathe deeper now. I smile more. And when I see my reflection in the water, I don't see regret anymore. I see survival. People always say forgiveness is about letting others off the hook. But I've learned it's really about freeing yourself from the hook you built for them. I forgave Ethan, not because he deserved it, but because I didn't want to carry the weight anymore. I forgave Melissa, too, not because she was kind, but because she taught me something no one else ever could: how to stand up for myself. Sometimes the people who break you are the same ones who show you where your strength begins. It took me 59 years to understand that. And now, when I sit on my porch, coffee in hand, looking out at the world I built back piece by piece, I don't think about what I lost. I think about what I gained: my voice, my peace, my boundaries. I used to live for my son. Now I live with myself. That's not loneliness, that's freedom. And if there's one thing I want anyone listening to this to remember, it's this: love doesn't mean giving until there's nothing left. Love means giving without losing yourself. Because the day you stop belonging to everyone else is the day you finally come home.